Welcome to the NTSA webinar series. My name is Jim Robb, and I'm the president of the National Training and Simulation Association. For those new to NTSA, we are a nonprofit association dedicated to facilitating dialogue between government, industry, and academia on topics related to providing the best training and training systems for our warfighters and first responders. This includes education as well as training. We host a portfolio of 9 events each year, the last of which is IITSEC, the largest training and simulation conference and exposition of its kind in the world. We are going to return, hopefully, to in-person this December, and we look forward and invite you to come. Due to COVID last year, most of last year and into the spring, like most others, we've been forced to move many of our events to the virtual world. But virtual worlds are a sweet spot for the training community, and certainly the virtual training community. The COVID situation is actually highlighting the value of distance learning and training in virtual worlds, and we continue to learn as we go on. As a means of increasing the dialogue between all of us while we're sheltered, we brought together a team to develop and produce webinars monthly and maybe even more in the future on topics of interest to the training and education community. So today's topic is the future of learning in a virtual world. We have over 200 folks registered from 10 countries, and I know that this shows that there's a lot of interest in the virtual training continuum. So let me now introduce John Schwartz from edX, who's going to moderate today's program. He's brought together a fabulous group of experts on virtual learning, and we look forward to your presentations. Over to you, John.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and I think in some cases, good evening. I'm really excited to be with everyone today, and I want to welcome you all to today's fireside chat, The Future of Learning in a Virtual World. My name's John Schwartz, and I'll be your moderator. And I manage the global business development and government practice for edX. And for all of you out there that aren't familiar with edX, edX is the world's only nonprofit online digital platform. We were founded back in 2012 by MIT and Harvard and offer courses taught by experts from over 150 of the world's top universities and companies. And I have to say, this is an extreme honor for me to have these 3 panelists that are really, digital transformation luminaries who I've learned and continue to learn so much from. And most importantly, really keep me inspired on my digital crusade to help organizations provide high quality online education to their workforces. So again, we're really appreciative that you've taken the time to be with us today, knowing that there's so much going on in the world. And also wanted to thank you all for the incredibly insightful questions, and we're going to get to a number of those hopefully at the end of the fireside chat. So the pandemic, as we all now know, has really changed just about everything: the way we live, the way we work, and really, for the purposes of today's chat, the way we learn. Governments, enterprises, the armed forces, every conceivable organization globally has had to adapt. Some, most, with very little preparation, and certainly in this case, and often with very little online experience. Really, by definition, this was a real inflection point. Everything that these 3 visionaries have been evangelizing for the last almost 10 years regarding digital transformation and online learning came true in less than 3 weeks. I mean, it was the most sudden change anyone could have ever predicted. Literally, millions and millions of learners and thousands of organizations around the world flipped a switch and went online. And I think what is remarkable to us is how edX and other platforms were able to seamlessly handle the sudden influx of demand. And we're not talking hundreds and thousands, we're talking about tens of millions of learners around the world that we were able to support and provide them the least amount of disruption in what was and still is a very disruptive time. 2021 is a completely different year for online learning and for learning in general. It's a new world we're living in, where leaders across an organization will need to amplify COVID learnings to create more opportunities for business growth, employee development, talent retention, and the key to that success is being agile enough to keep up with the pace of change. And if you take into account technology advances, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other different forms of technology, the challenges are significant. But the good news is for all of us here, and we're going to get to talk a lot about it, is that there is a time-efficient, cost-effective, content-driven solution. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to start with a series of targeted questions. We're going to follow that up with a round robin, and then we'll finish with your Q&A. So before we get started, let me introduce our panelists. Anant Agarwal is the founder and CEO of edX. Thanks. And professor of electrical engineering and computer science at MIT. And as the CEO of the largest global online nonprofit, Anant is really helping to transform traditional education by removing the barriers of cost, location, and access. edX is literally reimagining the possibilities of education by providing the highest quality, stackable learning experiences, including the groundbreaking MicroMasters and MicroBachelors program, which we just launched. Additionally, Anant's the recipient of the Padma Shri Award from the President of India and was named the Yidden Prize for Education Development Laureate in 2018, which I don't think Anant knows this, but I had the pleasure of watching live here in the States. Sanjay Sarma is the Professor of Mechanical Engineering and the Vice President of Open Learning at MIT. He's credited with developing many standards and technologies in the commercial RFID industry. Sanjay is also co-author of The Inversion Factor, How to Thrive in the IoT Economy. And I'm also proud to say Sanjay is also a board member of edX and one of the best storytellers that I've had the pleasure of listening to over the last almost 5 years. Last but not least, my good friend, Amy Titus, who's the Managing Director, Learning and Leadership Market Offering Lead for Government and Public Services at Deloitte, and is responsible for delivering talent, learning, organization transformation, and change solutions to her clients. Amy has lots of industry experience and thought leadership and brings that to her clients around the world over the last 25 years. She leads the Government and Public Services Learning Solutions practice. In addition, and I didn't know this, she's the Dean of the Chief Learning Officer Forum and Federal Learning Officers Workshop, which are both annual events. And lastly, has been a very patient teacher to me and to edX as we continue to work collaboratively across government entities. Okay, so let's jump in and really excited to kick this off. Anant, I'm going to kick this off with you. Given your original vision almost 10 years ago, I mean, honestly, were you surprised by how fast the world moved online and how platforms like edX were able to accommodate the needs of all learners?
When COVID hit earlier last year, in early March, of course, it took the entire world by surprise. From just 1 or 2% of the world's population either learning online or working online, we all turned on a dime and went to working and learning remotely, virtually 100% across the entire world. At edX, we are an online learning platform where we have over 3,000 courses and programs from some of the top institutions in the world. And what we found was that when this world went to learning online, edX was a natural place for people to come to. And, all of that said, we were completely surprised by the number of people that came in. We had a 1,000% increase in the number of people coming to edX, 1,000%. And in fact, in the month of April, edX had 5 million new registrants, new people who came to edX, and that equaled the entire number for 2019. So we were accomplishing more in 1 month than the entire previous year. And the good news was that we use technology, digital technology for learning. This is digital learning. And the beauty of digital learning is that we did not miss a beat, and our learners did not miss a beat. I mean, can you imagine a classroom where if the classroom has a capacity for 50 and suddenly 500 people, 10 times the number of people show up? Well, you might be squeezing 10 people in the corridors and break all kinds of OSHA laws, but then the remaining people have to wander the halls figuring out how to get in. But online, we are hosted by the cloud. All of our learning is via the cloud, and you can elastically expand or reduce the resources. And so the entire platform was able to scale seamlessly because of digital technology. And this affordance of digital technology, which is the ability to scale and provide flexibility for people who are learning, is just a key stellar affordance of digital learning.
Thanks, Anant. That's a great perspective. Amy, I'm gonna shift to you now, because you obviously lead the government practice, which is a very intricate web, as I'm learning through your kind of mentorship. But from your perspective, given this sudden and kind of meteoric change, how has the federal government been able to kind of further pivot online, in such a short amount of time, or have they?
Well, it's an interesting question, and thinking through it, I really think there are three groups when we think about the federal government pivoting. And as you know, there's always been online learning. There's always been some e-learning, but this, as Anant is saying, it's just been a revolution in terms of what's going to happen. And so let me just try to put those three types together. The first one is what I would call survive to thrive, meaning these were the organizations that had a flexible governance. They were able to quickly move, and most of them quickly moved because they had a faculty who were willing to try new things. And what they first did was put their classes online, do webinars. And quickly, I'm sure we can all imagine what that was like, and had to start thinking about, well, how do you break it up, and how do you start making this an interesting experience for the learners and really be learner focused. Then when you start thinking about surviving, they said, well, we've got to bring in all these tools. You can think of Zoom, Teams, Adobe Classroom. There's all kinds of other ones of bringing them in, and suddenly thinking about redesigning and breaking up chunks of learning into meaningful pieces of instruction. So these faculty, these organizations embraced the change, and they also saw it as an opportunity for many of them that had digitalization strategies to really use this. And there's you all know that phrase of never waste a crisis. So that's what they did, and they saw that this was a way to actually begin to start a new way of actually delivering the learning and being much more accessible and allowing people to get the learning they need when and where. And now they are moving from survive to thrive and thinking about implementing that strategy and really putting plans in place and to make these benefits sustaining. And they've all talked about the increased enrollments and the cost savings and other aspects of it that are positive. The second group I would call survive. They were more the planners, but they consulted leadership. They postponed some classes, they canceled some, they set priorities, but they used their existing technology to support the delivery of their courses, but thinking at some point we're going to go back, or at some point we're going to continue to do this and we'll get better at it. And the last group I call the freeze group really was struggling with it, maybe again thinking that this was a short-term change, not having necessarily digitalization strategy or thinking about the new needs and I think new people coming into government, coming into these jobs, coming into their organizations, and just the much more virtual reality that many young people have today. And so, and for some of them, security was definitely a key issue. And they also were, in many cases, very wedded to a live experience at their training center or their university that was especially built, and to serve a specific group, and found it hard to pivot. So those are the three blocks I would put what we're seeing today. And though I will say the innovation and scrappiness in terms of really figuring out how to bring a better learning experience to employees has been very much a foundational aspect of all of this. And it's very exciting, as you've heard from Anant as well, of just what can be done with these changes.
Thanks, Amy. Sanjay, I'm gonna switch to you and kind of change topic just a little bit. But from a macro perspective, and as a lead visionary of digital transformation on campus at MIT, as it pertains to online learning, in the last 8 months, I mean, I've heard you so many times, and I've learned, kind of the history of where this all started. But for you, what's been your aha moment, as it relates to learners from government, military, businesses, and just learners in general?
This is humanity's Apollo 13 moment, right? I mean, we were suddenly stuck wherever we were, whether it was at home or working, but in this COVID moment, and humanity used duct tape and scotch tape and a little bit of glue to make do. And that duct tape and scotch tape and glue is really digital. I like to joke that the 21st century really begins in 2021. It didn't begin in 2000, didn't begin in 2001. Amazon was already there, Google was already there, right? We had the shock of 9/11, we had the 2008 crash, but it was really a continuum. We have spent a year training in the new reality, and humanity hangs by a thread, and that is digital. And the other part of it is we're learning to innovate, the Apollo 13 thing, and we're learning. That's the key part. And so the same at MIT. I mean, we had to suddenly take our education online, which we did, of course, thanks to our amazing friends at edX, and using Open edX and using edX, the website, the site. We took our labs online. We have faculty shipping tools to students, kits to students. We're blessed in the sense that we have a pretty techie sort of group of faculty and students and staff. But taking research online, shipping research oscilloscopes to students' houses, professors setting up experiments on their kitchen tables, and hooking up really advanced audio-visual techniques and instrumentation techniques. We had concerts online. Our commencement was online. Our commencement, we had hundreds of students contribute notes, and they sang a song together. It's hard to synchronize. So they did it asynchronously, and one of my colleagues, Ike Chuang, whom Anant and I know as a dear friend, put together something to merge it all together. So it's been quite extraordinary. But as I said, we couldn't have pulled it off with the duct tape of digital learning. So it's quite a moment for all of us.
Thanks. So, I'm going to segue into something that's just kind of a derivative of what Sanjay just said, because I think, everybody would be interested in get all of your perspectives. But I mean, Anant, I'll go back to you first. I mean, what has amazed each of you most about the pace, scale, and quality of online learning, after COVID? I mean, we've kind of all been in the trenches for years, and we've always understood the efficacy and learning outcomes. But I mean, for all of us, nobody ever saw something like this coming quite as quickly. So Anant, for you, who really are one of the originators of this vision, what amazed you?
Well, I thought nothing would be able to amaze me. When we launched edX in 2012, and we had 154,000 people show up to my MIT Circuits course online. That was amazing. That was 9 years ago. And we thought nothing would amaze us. But here, overnight, we had, millions of new learners show up. And there's so many little things that amaze me. One is how a whole world decided they had to learn online, and we surveyed them. So I'm a digital guy, I'm a techie, and to me data talks. So we went and asked our learners, why are you coming to edX? What do you really care about? And what we found was actually very interesting. Of course, about 38% of learners who were coming did say that they had more time on their hands and they were looking to learn something new. But the remaining 62% of learners, what was amazing was we're exactly the same group of learners that were coming to edX traditionally. 25% of learners were coming because they wanted to upskill and reskill. They had more time on their hands during the pandemic, and they wanted to take short programs to reskill and be better prepared for this new world. About 15% had been furloughed or they had been laid off. And they were coming to edX to better prepare themselves for a world post the pandemic. And this phrase, which is come out stronger, which is let's use the pandemic time to freshen up our skills. Let's learn new skills. And learners are telling us that they want to use this time to get new skills. And so now these were the learners coming to edX previously, and now they were coming to edX in 10 times those numbers. And so what we discovered really was that there were no new trends as such, but there were emerging trends. And what COVID-19 did was simply poured gasoline on these trends and turned what were little flickering candlelight flames into massive conflagrations. And so really everything became exponential. And I think that was frankly it should not have been a surprise, but to me, that was really the big aha that we observed.
Excellent. And Anant, just one last question, because it's come up in some of the Q&A. I mean, did edX have any challenges with bringing, an extra 15 million learners in such a quick amount of time onto the platform? Or was that something that we were always prepared? And certainly I've been advocating that, but since I don't sit on the back end side, there's been a lot of questions about, bandwidth and data and, is there any capacity issues? If you could just give a quick, what you're...
Sure. Look, edX has been in the business of scale, and I like to joke that unless something has 6 zeros in it, it is not interesting to edX. And so we've been in the business of scaling up and exponentials. And in fact, in the very first course of edX that my colleagues and I offered in 2012, we expected 200 students in our course, online course. We had 154,000. Okay, so we know the power of zeros, and we know the power of digital and the power of cloud. We know how to scale. We built a scalable platform. But that said, going overnight from, by increasing by a factor of 10 has challenges. But I think our learning community, our business community, our community learning on edX did not miss a beat. And our teams were able to bring all the resources to bear to make it completely seamless. And with our partners at the hosting companies like Amazon or university partners with teaching assistants and so on, everything was able to scale. And there was effort. There were some snafus along the way, but things worked out.
Great. And Amy, again, because you come from such a unique perspective, with the federal government. I mean, and again, you've also had a lot of online experience. What amazed you? I mean, what really was, wow, I just never saw that coming, or I can't believe how effective it was, from all your industry experience, even going back to your banking days, what amazed you?
But it was how people were able to look at this COVID crisis and quickly assemble to train remotely contact tracers, to train people who would answer the public's questions around benefits, just so fast. And immediately it happened, they were out there figuring out how to train all these people remotely and virtually so that they could answer these people's questions and really be responding to needs. And that was impressive. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was where we saw some experimentation going on. And I want to talk about one particular university within the government where these have always had the requirement for hours. You have to have 40 hours of classroom training, right? Well, they decided that with moving to virtual, let's take away that requirement. What's going to happen? Is no one going to come? I mean, Anant talked about all these people coming. Well, guess what? More people did take the online learning opportunities than before. But what they did was they responded to quality. They responded to the learner experience so that automatically the people who build learning and deliver it in various ways, I saw the avatars or whatever, they got instant feedback. If people didn't come, that meant it wasn't good. So this was already a way of really bringing more value and quality. And I just thought that was absolutely astonishing. And I love telling that story.
That's great.
I could go on, but those are two, I think, just things that I thought were really exciting.
No, thanks, Amy. Sanjay, do you have anything to add? You know, any piece of that was particularly, you know, amazing in addition to, you know, how you described kind of your aha moment, you know, on campus?
I like the way Anant put it, which is that it was the embers were always there in terms of configuration. I actually think there was a pent-up demand for the experiments that Amy's talking about. That thankfully sadly we were in a comfort zone that we didn't exercise the energy to sort of execute, and this pushed us over the edge. So there are a number of things that we've done that we ought to have done before, you know. And in doing so, we've discovered a bunch of things. For example, we've discovered that when someday we return to campus, when nature grants us back the privilege of being together again, we will keep chats going. You know, we want students to, because students are more, they want to chat with the professor and TA a little bit, say, I didn't get that, you know. And, you know, so all these little things we're learning. And of course, my God, the power of online learning. I mean, it's been unleashed, and classes will never be the same again, I don't think. So,
you know what, what you said, Sanjay, is so, you know, there's such a prophecy in there, in that, you know, growing up, when I was in college or in classes, when, you know, I was, you know, I used to talk a lot always. And I remember I would get my wrists slapped all the time. And in India, in the early days, literally with a ruler, the teacher would whack me on my knuckles when I talked to the person sitting next to me. And so you're not supposed to talk to each other in class. And what online has shown us, that studying together, studying collaboratively is actually a very, very good thing in terms of learning outcomes. And so I think, as you talked about, this chat function for students in the classroom or wherever they are to be able to talk to each other and perhaps even to the professor and the TAs is actually a very good thing for learning outcomes. And I think these are just some of the new things that we are going to benefit from.
Thanks. Hey, I'm gonna move this question.
Add on to say, oh no, I'll just add that I was just on one of these collaboration calls where we're trying to solve problems. It was very effective. And instead of just jumping on, as we do in live, jumping on each other, not even hearing, we were better about listening to each other. And the time went very fast. And I was amazed. Because while you may design, experiencing these things yourself and seeing that the design works and how you can then improve it is absolutely critical.
So I'm gonna switch to, this is kind of a Sanjay Anant question, because I think you're both gonna have some great insight. So Sanjay, from a technology perspective, right? I mean, this Anant has kind of drilled this into me for my whole time in edX, but you know, with the onslaught of technology encroaching all learning, specifically AI and machine learning, you know, it's changing not only how we work now, but how we'll work in the future. And in fact, a little digression, you know, one of the programs that we're kind of teaming up with one of the government agencies is providing an introductory course on AI. So, you know, the 2 to 3 million federal workers will have some insight in terms of how their job roles will change in the future. But Sanjay, from your perspective, knowing that you already have a very intrinsic understanding of those changes, from today's standpoint, what skills are most in demand for virtual workforces today? And then I think everybody would be very interested in hearing, you know, some of your predictions. And Anant, you can jump in here, or Amy, you know, what we can expect in the next 3 to 5 years.
Look, first of all, the workforce is going to change a lot in the next 3 to 5 years. A lot of people will be obviously working from home, but also working gigs, it's a gig economy sort of thing, a lot of e-lancing. Companies in general, some will grow, but many won't. So the economy is going to get much more granular. In other words, it's not, 10,000 people working for a company, but 8,000 people working for a company and 2,000 consultants, right? And the consultant may be working with other companies as well. So there's going to be a lot of digital interfaces. There's going to be a lot of, every individual is going to become the CEO, the chief marketing officer of their own life to some extent, right? So you're going to have to learn marketing. You're going to have to learn to be CEO. You're going to have to learn to file your own taxes. You're going to have to learn to, be your own salesperson. So, but that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is that if you take technology, whether it's AI or IoT, they have to become force multipliers to the individual. They're like your secret digital assistant, So, and so what we'll end up having to do is develop a great deal of facility, an extreme level of facility in using these tools to become your sort of mini company that you carry around you all the time, because a lot of people will be individuals, and small companies, medium companies, large companies will adopt these technologies. Essentially, these are massive productivity gains. If we all look at each other, I'll be very honest with you. I was pretty, and I'm, techie guy. I was pretty lousy at Zoom.
Join the club.
I am spectacular at Zoom, at WebEx. I can do Stream Decks. I can, at GoToMeeting, at, every one of these systems, right? And we've learned this stuff without really noticing it, because we were forced into it. This is our new reality, And I think in the future, things like virtual reality, augmented reality, are going to play an even more important role. If you don't mind, I'm going to spend 30 seconds and just talk about augmented reality. We think of augmented reality as this highfalutin thing that's going to happen 5, 10, 20 years from now. Did you know that augmented reality has been used for 80 years?
No.
Now, let me tell you where. It was in flight simulators. Flight simulators are 80 to 100 years old because it's too expensive to train pilots in the air. In fact, during World War II, America was able to summon up pilots. Although both America and Japan were able to make the planes, America had the pilot advantage, and the Link company made flight simulators. And that was a force multiplier, right? So where I'm going with this is technology is going to be, in my view, more and more this thing that makes us incredibly productive in a very changing landscape of the economy.
I'm a techie guy, and initially thought I would pile on to what Sanjay said and talk about, how AI and digital would completely change the way we think and work. And however, as I thought more about it, Sanjay is completely correct that these technologies, whether it's IoT or AI or automation, I can think of a new human being with IoT sensors, at their fingertips and all over, and maybe implants and AI and digital assistants all helping us. But I want to go in a slightly different direction along the lines that Amy brought up. She talked about collaboration. What we are finding is that as digital takes over more and more of the kind of functions that we all hold near and dear, like adding numbers, making certain kinds of decisions, creating certain kinds of analyses and so on. Now, a lot of these things will get automated, but our ability to negotiate, to be human, communicate, critical thinking, these soft skills will become ever more important. And we're actually seeing the data. In fact, I looked at the top 15 courses on edX taken by government and corporation employees 2 years ago. And I took look at the list from 1 month ago. What was amazing was that a big difference in the new list was that there were 3 courses that you might classify as soft skills in the top 15 list. And the soft skills courses did not appear in the top 15 list, even as recent as 2 years ago. One of the courses, for example, was empathy and leadership from Berkeley. So things like empathy, leadership, ability to be humorous, negotiation, critical thinking, teamwork, communication, collaboration. I think these are going to become much, much more important skills that we all will need to sharpen. So rather than trying to compete with AI or compete with IoT, embrace it, but then focus much more strongly on human skills, and you can actually learn them and become more powerful with those skills.
I'll just unpack one thing, because joining edX and being around so many, just highly intelligent and visionary thinkers, I always took the little, sometimes a little a backhanded swipe at being a liberal arts major. But what I hear you both saying is, people that have well-rounded skills in this new virtual world are actually going to thrive quite well. So after this, I am absolutely going to call my parents and remind them of just how important my liberal arts education was. So thank you both for that.
You did good, John. You did good, John.
Yes, that's right. If I can chime in here,
sure.
That our research upholds exactly what Anant was saying around what are going to be the critical, what we call them the lasting, basically human inherent capabilities, that because skills are going to change, technology changes, but what is the constant, as Anant said? And I wanted to pick up one thing too about the future that Sanjay was talking about, which is where what we call it learning in the flow of life, or learning in the flow of work, that they're going to become inseparable. Just as we've all learned how to cope with this and quickly get a new tool in place and move forward, that we're really looking at seeing how do we build that in and link that to the future of work. So that's very much where I think in 4 to 5 years, those are going to be seamless in this concept that we've been talking about around continuous learning, or dare I say it, lifelong learning is a reality.
Thanks, Amy. Just to jump back to you, when we all moved remotely, I have to say, from my perspective at edX, not only, did we help millions of learners in a number of different programs, both in university, government, veterans, anybody that needed a lift, but we did it remotely, and we literally left the office, and the next day we were up and running, and we never missed a beat. And testament to our Anant and senior leadership for, I don't know how, and I've always wanted to ask Anant this, but I haven't seen him in 8 months, how we were able to make that transition. I mean, really, it was so inspirational, not only be able to help so many learners, but also be able to do it and work so cohesively, as a team of 220 people. So, but Amy, from your perspective, you've got a workforce of 300,000 plus learners, right? And you had no time to really ramp up. Nobody saw this coming. What is making, or what made Deloitte successful while so many others really continue to struggle through really no fault of their own?
Well, 2 things come to mind. First of all, we really tried to help each other because we weren't used to sitting in a chair all day. We used to send pictures of we would put up our office and say, how can I help me, Marie Kondo, or help me, designing to redesign my office and my chair. And we started really engaging too in wellness and well-being, because you get exhausted if you are working virtually all day long. So we really had to re-educate ourselves and learn new things like mindfulness. We've talked about it, but doing it, walking, taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, and also reaching out to people who are alone, who were living alone and didn't necessarily have that pod. So these were all the things that I think really helped us move through this and becoming more and more mature around this as you begin to realize that this is something that is absolutely doable. So that's the first one. And the second one, I'm sure will come back to me because I got so involved in that one about walking, making it on your schedule to walk. And that's how we learned how to work virtually, and also to organize learning, that you have to give people time to reflect. We used to have all-day labs. Now we break them up into short 1.5 hour ones, and they're more productive because people don't get exhausted. and they're fresh and you can come back again. So I could go on about but it was really helping each other, reaching out and doing. Now I remembered the other thing. The other thing was where we did a lot more external teaming, working with edX to go and bring solutions to others, working with lots of other groups in new ways because we couldn't be there in person. And I think it was both of those brought the workforce closer together, and I think more organizations working together in new ways.
Yeah, I think that's all makes a lot of sense. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all sharing this experience together, and certainly, at edX, there's been a really, humanistic, emotional quality to how we've all interacted with each other. There's been tremendous support, tremendous outreach, and even the perks and benefits that we've all been given, and I think it's across the board because I've seen it at other organizations, is really just, I think, kept us all, super inspired and motivated to kind of come through this together.
And to what Amy said, a lot of people think that things like mindfulness and so on, you can't learn these things online. And what is interesting, first of all, it's been so fantastic to collaborate with Amy and team on all the work that we're doing. But as Amy was talking about mindfulness, I said, interesting. Let me go and search to see if we have a course on mindfulness. So I went to, but very quickly, I typed in mindfulness on the edX search bar, and guess what? We have a course from Berkeley, from the Happiness Center at Berkeley, a course on mindfulness and resilience. And so a lot of these skills can be learned online, and then you can apply them in day-to-day life. So I'm just completely with you, Amy, in how many of these skills that are so important today can be learned, and they can be learned online.
Yeah, thanks for that, Anant. Okay, switching topics completely, and I know this is one, when I looked at the questions from all the people that are participating, I think this question came up about half the time. So I think it will be super interested in all your responses. And I'm going to go back to you. All of you on this panel, in this chat, see blended learning as a path forward for students and businesses, government. So the question is, and I've heard you talk about this a lot, Anant, but the question is, where does in-person and online learning intersect, and why? Why is that combination of both so powerful?
I think the future of learning, and I've said this very often recently, and it has been accelerated by COVID, but the future of learning is blended. And whether you're on campus as a resident student, or whether you're at a company or the government or the military, learning is going to be blended. What that means is that you're going to be spending some of your time learning completely online, and you're going to be spending some amount of your time learning in person. And both of these models will blend together, and this is going to be the future of learning. The way you learn online and in person have different kinds of skills that you need. So for example, when people have asked me, as a learner, they're focusing on the learner for a second, what do you have to keep in mind to be a good online learner? Now, we spend a lot of time thinking about how do I be a good in-person learner, but how do you be a good online learner? I talk about the 5 Ps. The first is partner. Find a study buddy or work in a team. Research from my colleague Lori Breslau at MIT has shown that on edX, when you found another person to work with, your grades were actually higher. Second is pace. Online, you can pace yourself flexibly. In person, I remember the professor was usually going too fast, and after the 5-minute mark, I would fall asleep. I would not follow anything going on, and many of you have seen the same thing. But online, you can pace yourself. Remember that. You don't have to try to rush. You can pause, and you can learn at your own pace. You can rewind videos. The third P is participate. In online learning, you're told not to talk to each other. Shut up and listen to the professor. I'm God, listen to me. But however, online, it's different. You should participate in the discussion forums and collaborate, and you learn better from your peers than from a stage on the stage. The fourth P is practice. With online learning on edX, we follow the active learning model, where you learn a small chunk, and then you exercise, you practice it. So you learn and practice so that you are applying those skills. And the final P is pencil. Take notes, whether online or in person. Make sure to take notes because that helps you learn. So these 5 Ps, partner, pace, participate, practice, and pencil, are the 5 Ps that you should keep in mind as you learn online to be a much better online learner.
And Sanjay, I know you agree with what Anant just said, but from a learner perspective on the university side, my understanding from Anant over the years is that there's still a healthy, cynicism in some regards about where that intersection with online learning and in-person learning is. I mean, I'm sure COVID has helped support the cause because everybody has seen how efficient, it is, and we're able to ramp up because the infrastructure and the content already existed. What do you see, going forward?
Yeah, first of all, I think obviously COVID has helped. It's also hurt. Let me explain. Zoom University is not proper online education.
Right.
Proper online education is when you produce asynchronous video, well thought through, and you put it on a platform like edX, and students can watch it. They can rewatch it. It's the pace thing that Anant talked about. There's a forum. There's a partner thing that Anant talked about. So first of all, when we go straight onto Zoom and the professor just talks at 50 squares in a gallery, that is not online. That is remote learning, and we need to clarify. And if you have a child that's zoomed out, you have my full sympathy. If you have an adult that's zoomed out, I get it. That's not online. So I just want to clarify.
Is zoomed out a new phrase here?
I call it Zoom and Doom. But anyway, so that's just want to clarify that. The second thing is, there are things you can do in person that you cannot do online, such as, do a lab, build something together. It's hard, right? You can't weld online. I mean, you sort of eventually virtual reality will get there, but you won't be able to reproduce the smell and the feel the heat and so on. Coaching, you can do quite a bit online, but then if you're welding or doing something physical, or you're working on math problems, coaching is getting there, but it's not there yet. It'll get there eventually, right? So the problem right now is the things we could do well online, we're doing in person. And what a blended classroom does is it pushes that stuff online. In fact, you do much better online because you can do the pace, you can do all the other things. But then you can create the room to do the things you can only do in person. So as I said, when we get back to the classroom, we've got to make it count, and we've got to use proper online to do the things we can only do better online.
Yeah, that's such a great point. The last question before we head into the Q&A, and Amy, I'll start with you, is when the pandemic, wanes, I mean, honestly, we talk a lot about this, but do you expect in-person learning to resume, as it did before? Or, as Sanjay and Anant have just kind of hypothesized, and I think they know intrinsically what the difference is going to be, do you see online adoption, remaining and perhaps, I think, growing exponentially compared to where it was before?
Well, when I answer questions like this, I always go, let's go back to what happened after the epidemic of 1918, and then the Roaring '20s came. Well, I don't think we're going to see people going from seclusion to dancing in the streets. I do think that we're going to definitely see an ongoing commitment to digital learning. However, I want to underscore both what Sanjay and Anant said, that value is going to be paramount. That is, are we using those tools we have, that in-person experience, in the best way? And I think we'll be relying, as we are now, and increasingly, on human-centered design. I talked about value, and where we talked about motor skills. I mean, there's some things you need to actually fly the plane at some point. You need to actually use firearms or take care of a patient in real time, and those will always be there. But we can prepare people and accelerate it much better using online learning at first. And that's what the military has found, that people who do practice simulations, then go to fly the plane, for example, are faster. Their learning is accelerated. And I do think, though, that there are always going to be security concerns of sharing information, of the concern that once if you're out of a skiff and you're sharing, data across some kind of platform or network, there is security. But I think we're going to get better at that. I'm very confident. And so I think we're going to see more. But when we have learning in the flow of life, many of these things will come together.
You know, I completely agree, John. Both Amy and Sanjay both have emphasized that getting together in person is expensive. And in these days, it's unhealthy. And it's also difficult. And so I'll just quote word for word what Sanjay said: make in-person learning count.
Sanjay, anything to add, or I think
you're on mute, Sanjay.
I'm sorry, we need an AI system to unmute when I speak. I think that, by the way, one application of AI is to look at student engagement. Of course, that's also invades privacy, but there's some really interesting things one can do there. But I think, look, I really feel that we took in-person for granted all these years.
Yeah.
And we've learned to survive without. And that taking for granted business has economic consequences. It has, frankly, carbon footprint consequences, you know, all sorts of things. So we're going to tiptoe back to normal life, but I think we have to tiptoe. You know, it's sort of like I've lived in Boston all my life, but, you know, there are sites in Boston I haven't seen because I took it for granted, right? I mean, it's a tourist city. And so I think we really need to think through as we tiptoe back why in-person counts. And I think online is going to make it richer.
Yeah, I know why it's going to count for me, Sanjay, because I am one of those zoomed out parents. I have 3 children, as I frequently say on my Zoom calls to other edX teammates that, you know, under the age of 14, who are fully online 24/7, 7 days a week. So I am really looking forward to having a cup of coffee with Anant back in Cambridge when we come out of this. Listen, we're kind of at the end of our questions, and, you know, you all continue to really genuinely inspire me, and I learn a lot. While we've got about 8 minutes left, if it's okay, I want to throw out some questions and let any of you kind of jump in. And we've kind of culled these because we've covered a lot of them. The first question is, you know, on an online platform, how do we evaluate understanding and engagement? And I think this is an obvious one for you to start, Anant, and I'll let Amy and Sanjay jump in.
You know, again, I think it's pretty natural. How do you, I would just respond by saying, how do you evaluate learning and engagement on campus? In person, it's the same thing. On campus for centuries, we have used your performance in class. You know, do you get a good grade? You know, have you learned the material through assessments? That's how we assess whether they've learned the material. And frankly, online, it's actually even easier to do that because you can have continuous assessments with computer grading, you know, in a digital manner where you interleave knowledge transfer and a quick exercise, just interleave them together so you're assessing very quickly. Engaging, you know, in a 100% class, you know, I promise you, the people in the last row are not engaged. And so the question is online, you know, how do you do that? It's the same thing. Although in the future we can imagine various techniques to see engagement, to see are people watching videos. You know, researchers are doing all kinds of studies to look at, you know, how does engagement as measured by amount of time spent watching videos or doing exercises, how does that correlate to performance? So you can do all of these things digitally once you can start measuring some of these things. You can't measure in a classroom. There's just no way to digitally measure.
But I mean, Anant, tell me if I'm wrong here, but one of from my perspective, and what I'm always working with clients on when we talk about engagement, if we look at the success rate of people that successfully complete courses, circa 80%, I mean, is that a fairly good indication of clearly their understanding of the content and the fact that they've successfully completed the course, or am I remiss?
No, the number you quoted, we have studies on edX that show that for people from companies and the government and the military and so on, when employees learn on edX, they're completing at 79%. And so 79, 80%. And so that's a very high number. And usually we've taken success and completion as a proxy for having learned the material and having been engaged. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know how correlated they are, but the bottom line is, as a learner, I am coming in to learn something, to learn a skill so I can apply it. And so if you're doing well and if you pass the course, there's a good likelihood you're going to be able to do it.
Thanks.
Well,
Amy.
If I can just throw out something there, though, that's a little controversial, is that we also say that if you're searching for something, when you get what you need from the course and you leave it, is that something that says you haven't learned and you haven't engaged? So it's a question of with the online that we can be able to measure that probably better than the classroom, where you have to sit there and be there till the bitter end, even if you're in the last row, as Anant was saying. So we can actually, I think, begin to think about measuring more aspects of human performance and engagement with content and practice, combining both online and in person.
So Amy, I'm gonna stay with you for a second, because this is definitely a very topical question, but I'm only gonna give you 75 seconds to answer it. There's been a lot of questions about, is there a specific online platform, that's optimal to connect, government or DoD clients? I don't know if you want to talk about what we're kind of collaborating on that's going to make it easier, or, so again, the question is there one preferred platform? How can we streamline the content curation process so people from different government organizations can find what they need when they need it?
Well, if somebody were to ask me, is there one best platform on anything, I'd say no, and probably a better one's being invented right now, because there's just this whole field of learning technology is morphing at a speed we've never seen before. But one where we are collaborating together with the Advanced Distributed Learning is looking at a universal course catalog, and how can all the different branches and how can different groups have access to all the courses that the other ones have, so that you don't have to travel if it's going to be local, or you can get it when you need it, or it can be focused. So that's very much, I think, a way of that kind of collaboration is something that we will see more of in the future. And I think this whole push to virtual and online is going to accelerate that desire to be able to have a universal course catalog.
Oh, I love the concept of a universal catalog. I remember, growing up, I was learning in college. I wanted to learn a course on VLSI, and my university, this was in 1979, did not offer a course on VLSI when a college down the street did, and I had no way of taking that course. But now, if we can create these online universal catalogs, I'm just so excited, where anybody anywhere can learn anything they want, whether you're on campus, whether you're in a company, and it's all at your fingertips. And I see no other way beyond digital that can make such a universal learning catalog happen. Very exciting, Amy.
So we've come to the end of the hour, and I knew it would go much quicker than any of us wanted it to go. And again, I'm really appreciative and thank you for letting me host and moderate this with you all. If anybody has any final thoughts, but otherwise I'm going to turn it back to Rear Admiral Rob. But this was fantastic. So thank you all.
I'll just say one thing. I feel that learning is going to be a continuous new benefit that companies and enterprises are going to have to give their employees. And I think online is the only way to do it. So that's really my closing. But thank you.
Agree.
Rear Admiral Rob, the floor is now yours. Thank you, everybody. Oh, you're on mute, Jim. Jim, you're still on mute. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.